Just like we have preschool for kids, we have Jshell for beginner programmers. We're going to talk about just that.
Let's talk about Jshell, which is one of the main features introduced in Java version 9. You can think of Jshell as a fun little toy, or rather a professional toy that a beginner Java programmer can play with. Well, what do I mean by that? Jshell is actually a command line tool which will read the input from the user, and the input that a user can enter can be any valid Java expression, something like integer x equals 10 plus 5. The same would be executed, meaning that it would calculate the sum of 10 plus 5 and store the value inside the variable x, and same would be printed on the console as x equals 15, which will then be seen by the user. And the same process would be repeated again and again, which means it's going to allow the user to enter something once again. It's going to execute it and print some results. So that's read, execute, print, loop. Read, execute, print, loop, or simply REPL. But what's the significance of this? Well, it is to create a good first impression on Java programming for someone who is getting started to learn Java. Let me explain it with an example. Say that you are a beginner programmer and you've heard a lot about Java programming being one of the best languages to ever exist. You're pretty excited to learn Java, and so you just wanted to try with a very simple application, which is probably a Hello World application. So for that, what you have to do is you need to create a class and then introduce a method with the signature public static void main, string args, and only then will you actually introduce a statement that will print the message that you wanted to print. And it's not enough that you write the source code. You actually need to create a Java file, copy that source code inside the Java file, and compile the Java file so that you get the bytecode, and then you run that class file, only after which you will see the results. Now think from the perspective of a complete beginner who doesn't know anything about programming and he wanted to learn Java. This is surely going to create a bad impression because he wanted to experiment with Java by just printing a simple hello world message, which is this part, but he's also required to pay attention to a lot of other things which might take a while to understand. Like they may be having questions: what is public, what is static, what is void, why the method name has to be with the name main, and what are string args, where are they coming from, and what are they doing, and why is this called a method in first place, not a function like in other programming languages. So they get all these questions, and ultimately they come to conclusion that Java is a very difficult language to learn when it actually isn't. So Jshell will come in to rescue in this case. It will allow them to enter some Java expressions and instantly see the results without having to introduce the class or main method or even compile the Java file, etc. And when they see results based on what they enter, that will give them some confidence that they can learn Java. So Jshell would actually give that first good impression about Java programming for someone who is getting started with Java, so that it will motivate them to learn more and execute better Java code. It's like if you make a good first impression with your crush, then your journey would be smooth. Otherwise, if you make a bad impression in the very first go, then obviously, no matter how hard you try, everything would look very complicated. But that being said, you might be coming to conclusion that Jshell is not a tool for somebody who is experienced or somebody who already know Java programming. Well, that's not the case. I mean, let me try to give you a use case where Jshell can be useful for professionals. Imagine that you are working on a real-time project and you're required to validate the user-entered form. One of the things that you might do is to check the length of the person name, and you want it to restrict to only 10 characters. You're probably going to use one of the methods available in string, like the length method, that would give you the length of a given string. Now, you don't know if the length method would consider whitespace as a character or not. And if it does, you don't know if the length method would consider multiple whitespaces as a single whitespace or multiple whitespace characters. In order to figure this out, you would either need to write a test case that will test multiple scenarios, and this is definitely a lengthy process. A better approach, however, which I usually used to do before Jshell, is to create a Java file, have a sample code with bunch of variables, and experiment with the string manipulation methods and see if result is as expected. But that still takes a bit of an effort, because inside Eclipse, if you want to run Java program, you have to actually create a Java project. Once you do that, you have to again introduce a class file with public static void main, and only then you can experiment with your code. With Jshell, however, you can just execute this statement alone on the console and you'd get the results instantly, and you can figure out how the length method is working. This definitely is a lifesaver at times. Next, we're going to take a look at how we can play with our professional toy. Alright, let us try to play and experiment with Jshell. In order for Jshell to work, you need to first install Java, which I assume you did. In case if you want to verify you've successfully installed Java, just type in the command java-version and you should be able to see the version of Java that you've installed. Once you do that, type in the command jshell. Just as you have the commands Java and Java-C, you also have the Jshell. And once you hit enter, you're going to see a welcome message. Along with that, it has also indicated us to take a look at the help document by typing in help. So this is all that Jshell has to offer us. What we're going to experiment with right now are vars or variables and methods. I'm going to say I equals 10 to start with, and this is going to show us an error. If you're an experienced developer, you probably know what this error means. This means that we don't have a variable I in order to assign a value to it. Java is a strongly typed language, and when you declare a variable, you have to be specific about the type of data that a variable can hold. But if you think from the beginner perspective, they probably don't understand what this error means. And in order to understand this, they're probably going to do a Google search. And when they do a Google search, they're probably going to come across with public static void main, and they'll be lost in a different world altogether. So this is something that I wish that the Java community might want to improve upon. They better be more specific about the errors so that a beginner can actually understand it in better fashion. So instead of saying I equals 10, I'm going to say int I equals 10, and this works. I'm going to initialize another variable, j equals I plus 20. So this is an expression, and that has been evaluated to 30. We can also type in any valid Java statement, system.out.println hello world or whatever, and it works. We can also write methods. I'm going to say void math accept no arguments, and I'm simply going to print out something. System.out.println sum is, I'm going to say I plus j. So this should ideally be printing 40. Okay, method has been created, and the way you call it is, you don't have to create instances. You can say math, and that would execute that method. Now you might be wondering how Jshell is able to memorize the data that we've entered, the variables, the methods, etc. Well, behind the scenes, it's actually maintaining a class file with whatever the methods and variables that we're trying to experiment here. But it's going to abstract all that stuff from the user because of the fact that it is assumed that beginners would actually play with this tool, and They don't want to complicate things, obviously. That's the very reason why Jshell even come into picture. Going back to our earlier example where you're a serious professional who's trying to understand the length of a string, you can enter John Doe dot length, and this should print the length of John Doe. You want to verify if the length method would also consider white spaces as a single character. I'm going to enter multiple white spaces and hit enter, and it shows 18, which means I can conclude that the length method would consider white spaces as a character. Let's take a look at what else we have under the help document. We have list. It's going to list the source you have typed. Let's do that real quick. If I say list, so these are all the set of commands or the expressions that we've entered. You can also edit a specific item by its ID. So these are the IDs. Let's say I would like to change the value of I to something else. So I'm going to say edit 1. Okay, this has shown us a cute little prompt where we can actually do some edits. I'm going to change this value to 100 and say accept. So the value has been changed to 100. Now if I call math, obviously this will show the updated value. And likewise we got other commands that we can run. You also got save in case if you'd like to save this session. By the way, if you exit out of the Jshell by entering exit, then everything would be lost. So maybe you want to save it. You can just save it into a file, and then you can open it by pointing to that file so that you can continue working from where you have left previously. Imports would just show us list of imports. It's pretty straightforward. So that's pretty much what Jshell has to offer. But like I said before, this is not a full-fledged, complete, beginner-friendly tool. Because as a beginner, if they want to experiment with variables and methods, they probably need to know what is a variable. And in order to know that, they need to write a program. And to write a program, there they're going to see public static void main, and questions would start popping up. So we can think of this tool as something that's more like a confidence builder than to do anything significant. But for an experienced developer, this is a quick tool that you can just simply launch and execute few statements if the need arises.
I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like and subscribe. The link to the next part of this course is in the description below. Also, if you want to learn Java with practice, with quizzes, assignments, coding puzzles, and interview questions, I cannot do that on YouTube. So you need to take this course on my own website. The link is in the description below. I'll see you in the next part of this course.